When we walked into the hospital, it was chaos. So many people, a few nurses, but no doctors in sight. Dust filled the air, cracks lined the walls, and the sounds of yelling and weeping echoed everywhere. There weren't enough beds, so many patients lay in rows on the floor. A nurse rushed up to me and asked, "Do you know how to sew?" "Sort of," I answered. She glanced at others working and said, "Well, you can't do worse than them." Handing me a needle, she pointed at a man and said, "Start with him." So I did.
We carried all our stuff with us in blanket sacks everywhere we went like hobo hoarders. But to be fair, there was a lot of looting going on. We were standing there at the hospital Sunday night with all our stuff over our shoulder, and my companion said, "Just stand here for a minute and guard our stuff and I'll get in there and start helping." I said, "That sounds like a pretty good idea. I can just stand here with my back to the wall and guard the stuff." Pretty soon, a German nurse came up and said, "Are you hurt?" in English. I said no, and she said, "Good. Then you can help." So they put me right with my companion helping to sew people up. What I saw made me sick to my stomach, but when something is to be done, you have to do it, no matter how sickening it is.
I mostly stitched wounds. That was the first time I had ever done that. There were only 3 doctors, and they were in surgery constantly. I barely saw them. One of the men I treated recognized me. He remembered us teaching him. A brick wall had collapsed on his arm, leaving him bruised and covered in deep scratches. The hospital conditions that night were unbelievable. My hands were filthy, and with nothing to clean them, I wiped them on my clothes and kept working. There was no anesthesia for patients with gaping wounds or scalps peeled back from their foreheads. They simply screamed as we stitched them up. There was no time to slow down for any one person. The floor looked like a butcher shop. Clumps of cut hair, blood mixed with dirt, gauze pads soaked in red, all trampled together. There was no time to clean. More and more people crowded in, while others outside begged to be let in. It made us sick, but we had no choice. These people needed help. The only treatment available was streptomycin powder, usually injected with sterilized water. But there was no water, so we just poured the powder directly into wounds. I don't know how many people developed infections, but it was the best we could do. I turned to my companion and said, "The people we treat tonight will have a chance. They might get infections, they might be treated under filthy conditions, but at least we could stop the bleeding." All night we heard cries from people no one could reach. The hospital was packed beyond capacity. Many outside were still alive, just waiting for morning, hoping someone would come to carry them in. The hospital had electricity. It was the only place that did. Around 10 p.m., ambulances stopped bringing people. The doctors, exhausted, finally lay down to rest. We did too. But throughout the night, the earth trembled with aftershocks. In the darkness, we could hear people moaning and crying. A few badly injured patients, terrified the hospital would collapse, tried to run outside. We tried to calm them. We prayed with them. We prayed whenever we had a moment. More than medicine, they needed hope, so that's what we gave them. We continued working the next morning. The ambulance started to bring in people at 6 a.m. They must have used a loudspeaker to go around and call for anyone with nursing experience. By noon, there were like 20 nurses, young and old. Around 5:30 p.m., they thanked us and said we could go.